Boards of Canada's Tomorrow's Harvest is a weak album. I think Anthony Fantago, or the Needle Drop dude, or whatever, that bald guy, might be right that this record does deserve a 6 out of 10. It's a mediocre album. Here it is being played right now on the first vinyl on the second disc after the Spanish transmission song. And you probably have heard this song before. Ooh, it's Cold Earth. Once debuted at a Michigan show. That's the big problem with this album. It's a lot like Toy Story 3 or Daft Punk's fourth album. It seems to be that there was a cult that developed around Boards of Canada. And that cult really liked or missed the days of Gio Gotti. Oh yeah, and Gio Gotti is a fucking scary record. I had that when I was 12 years old, and I remember just weird memories of that. Yeah, Salad Fingers, Webble and Bob, all that jazz. But this record, this record, a lot of people had said, oh, this is a lot like Gio Gotti in a way. No, this record's nothing like Gio Gotti at all. Every Boards of Canada has been a special release. Music Has a Right with Children and the demos, that was really that started their career. Oh yeah, typical box synth right here. Oh yeah, I'm gonna get a Korg MS-20 Mini. I'm gonna get a Moog Prodigy. I'm gonna be like box sounding. That's the big problem with Boards of Canada. There's too many. This is the album that became the hipster dipshit album, where people found out or became aware of the box sound, quote unquote. Oddly enough, this album came out in 23, right before the Vaporwave fad started. And now it's hilarious to think that some dumb Z kids or late millennials tend to think, well, Boards of Canada was Vaporwave before Vaporwave. I don't think Boards of Canada is Vaporwave at all. Yes, they focus around feeling quote-unquote eccentric music, and especially this album. Now, I can go into details why this album is incredibly mediocre. You're hearing it right now. This is a debut Carbon with the red needle thingy and audio engine from Turntable Lab. This is my setup right now. Tomorrow's Harvest came out a few years ago in 2013, and they had this giant commercial campaign for it, which is like, ooh, find the codes on Record Store Day. I kind of remember it, but they only had one single for the album. Wasn't that good. But if you look at the Warp commercials, the Boards of Canada was quite aware that this album was just made for fun. It's basically a fetishization over the old John Carpenter sounds. This is an obvious influence where you see Tomorrow's Harvest. It's an album that tries to mimic John Carpenter and fails to be original. As you can see right there, there's two people in the center. I tend to think that's the Bach brothers right there. Unfortunately, they made this art direction, and I think the art direction for this album is very poor. There's been rumors that, yeah, they like old movies. One journalist said they named Tomorrow's Harvest after Deadly Harvest. Now, I do believe Tomorrow's Harvest is a very bad name. Like, Tomorrow's Harvest? That sounds like yesterday's tomorrow. They could have named it something else, but I just think that there's some awkwardness with the word Tomorrow's Harvest following it. I don't know, I think they should have a name change. And that album art is just, they say, ooh, it's a ghost of the San Francisco skyline, when really it's just this kind of yuppie, hippie, like indie rock stuff, you know? And that's exactly what happened on this album. Boards of Canada became more of a live act. Well, they don't never really play live. I mean to say, a band. They became this physical band, something like they were trying to do on the previous album, The Campfire. I remember when The Campfire came out in 2005. I remember the old Flash websites for it, and I disliked it. There's the Dave Van Cowboy song. Ew, I just didn't like that guitar, and they just went away from Gio Gotti. If you think about it, they really only have two really big albums. That's Music Has a Right to Children and Gio Gotti, and I strongly believe Gio Gotti is their best album. This is very similar to Daft Punk's Homework and Discovery. debut album being really good and Discovery being the best. Then something happened on the third with Humans After All, and it just sucked. Same with The Campfire. That album just fucking sucked too. Well, some way. I mean, Adult Swim exploited the shit out of it. And it took a good 8 to 10 years to tell normies to say, ooh, you ever listen to this band called Boards of Canada? Ooh, and this trip-hop band, you know, it sounds like DJ Shadow or Mr. Scruff, became okay with normies, and basically a Fox News reporter thinks it's, okay. Hey, I'm a Fox News reporter. Listen to Boards of Canada. And this, I think, album is the nail in the coffin for Boards of Canada. The entire soundtrack seems to me that they just wanted to make an album for the sake of making an album. And the aesthetics of this album is just really boring. Gio Gotti had this very mysterious 1960s demonic, satanic, scary feel for it. It sounds so unreal. Take a look at the movie Sinister, playing on the 4th track of Gio Gotti, or Beware the Friendly Stranger. It's this very scary kind of music that really differs from Music Has a Rights to Children, which was more like trip-hop, but also had its sinister scenes in there. And this album is kind of like the aesthetic itself, Tomorrow's Harvest, like some bad John Carpenter film about tomorrow's harvest, about how today's not, and it's this weird 1970s film. Ooh, there's the synth again. Ooh, 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 you know what I'm saying? It's like they're rather mimicking their past, and it's hard to imagine if this came out in 2013, then almost 11 years ago was Gio Gotti. And it seems like the brothers really just have been living private lives and just making money off this and being the douchebag J.D. Salinger archetype, neutral milk hotel bullshit, you know? And so this album is average. It's 5 out of 10. Probably the best track on this album is the very last track, which is very scary and just gave me those nostalgic feel. Oh, how much I wish it was like Gio Gotti, but it's nothing. This album, I would say that every Boards of Canada is its own unique release. This is kind of like Depeche Mode's Exciter. Exciter being something more like, ooh, watch Depeche Mode do York and Massive Attack and Radiohead all at once. This album definitely had this huge mainstream hipster shit to it, where they tried to pump up this album by saying, finally, a new Boards of Canada album. But really, they just slided. They just made everyone believe the music was good, but really, it was just a normie version of selling this formula or this product to the masses. You know, it becomes, they make these false promises and say, oh, there's so much subliminal stuff in this, when really they're just referencing off these silly shit. I mean, like, supposedly the 3rd track is supposed to be based on the Plague Dogs. You know, this silly 1970s Waterfront Down movie they saw, you know. Tracks like these, they'll make, like, references to things they like, but really this reminds me of taking a trip back in the 90s, when, like, trip-hop and ambient and, like, Moby was, like, you know, and then you do it again 20 years later, and it's like, ooh, I'm a Gen Xer, I'm an early millennial, these were the days, yeah, cool. Now I might as well start listening to New Jack Swing again. And that's what this record has its biggest problem, is that Boards of Canada have realized they are a product, and they must sell this product that's a mix between Music Has a Right to Children and Gio Gotti into one product. And what's that called? It's called Tomorrow's Harvest. It's all these false promises, and now I will say the record has huge clarity. They definitely had a really good mastering on this. The previous releases were muddy and shitty and lo-fi and had that nice grit to it. And Campfire was just, yeah, it was like this band shit going on. Kind of reminds me of some, like, stupid dipshit Wes Anderson stuff they would play, but, you know. Again, I think what makes this album really weird is, so people, you know, and I really dislike this whole, there was an interview in The Guardian where the brothers were saying, oh, we've gotten nihilistic over the ages, and it's really up to the viewer to make this. There's different narratives. And it's just like, well, if users can, like, look at the text and look at this music and make up their own definition, then I guess this is a concept about fascism. Ha ha ha. See, and this is where the vagueness comes in, the whole Sweppel pitchfork philosophy that doesn't really head up. it's just whatever, dude. It's just like it's been done before. And so, you know, a commenter once said online, he said, I'm very disappointed with this album because the album is just one-dimensional. And Boards of Canada is being good at being one-dimensional. They got the sound, and they're going to do it. I mean, every Boards of Canada album has been different conceptually, but it's just, I would not suggest this album to start. I don't suggest this as a starting album. I would just say skip this album entirely. In fact, I kind of think this album is basically like Kiss's Lick It Up. This is what it, yeah, this is Kiss's Lick It Up, you know? It's not that good. And it's just this John Carpenter soundtrack. They've got, now one thing I could say is that they got this album as if there was a movie called Tomorrow's Harvest. But there's no such thing as a movie called Tomorrow's Harvest. And so that makes it really awkward. It's too authentic to be a piece. And there's no horror element in it at all. You know, they're trying to talk about this, like, post-nuclear, like, they really, like, abandoned places and isolation. And the thing to recommend, this book right here, Folk Horror Revival Field Studies. This is the book which I could understand what makes Bach different. And what makes Bach different is this philosophy of field studies. And now the introduction here, you know, what makes this, you know, field studies, you know, we could talk about movies and the folk horror, Appendix Fen, really good stuff. But he defines it as landscape, isolation, skewed moral beliefs, happening and summoning. This is this, you know, Boards of Canada, Tomorrow's Harvest, and GeoGotti, would be folk horror. So when you hear Wikipedia definition, some douchebag kid tells you, oh, this is vaporwave. No, faggot, this is folk horror. And you can learn a lot from local folk horror, like movies like The Wicker Man, and just like the same John Carpenter shit. And, you know, think about the Scottish duo who grew up on, like, weird movies like The Plague Dogs and Waterfront Down, and now they're making this album where they have all the synthesizers in the world, and I don't know where they get their trust fund from or the money, but oh, you know, the Warp promos for this was so fucking bad. Like, even the record company Warp kind of knew that this album was bland. It was basically they had a product to sell, and Bach understand that most of this album's success had to do with their fucking commercial campaign for it. I mean, there never was a commercial campaign for GeoGotti. Supposedly they had the opening, the listening party at a church, and they had some other things to it. And yeah, and you might hear the weird esoteric things that people talk about. Don't listen to those Wikipedia faggots. Okay? I mean, it's okay to look at Bach pages. I mean, the best thing you could say, Boards of Canada is a lot like Gene Wolfe, the Book of the New Sun. Because in the Book of the New Sun, you can look at different words and interpret it differently. And people make up their own weird and find different... But the thing is, what really fucking annoys me is the Bach tells us, you can make up your own narrative. It's what you do with it. They have no absolute truths, and it's just fucking stupid. I mean, come on. What are you doing? You're just making pretty sounds. You're fucking worse than One-O-Tricks Point Never. Fuck you.